Welcome to the event today, held by and organized by the Center for Studies in Higher Education here at UC Berkeley. The title today of today's talk is International Campuses in India and the Future of Student Mobility. And we're really, really pleased to have Dr. Rahul Choudaha with us, who's been affiliated with the center over the years and has just an amazing and accomplished career over time. He's still in his career, but he's done a lot. He has worked with a number of organizations here in the U.S. over time, including the World Education Services for 7 years, and also study portals and various other aspects of looking at student mobility. He most recently was with the School of Business in India, the Indian School of Business, and now is the Chief Operating Officer at a startup international campus in Mumbai with the University of Aberdeen. And Rahul's background is such that he's, focused mostly on global organizations and student mobility issues and international campuses and these kinds of areas that are really relevant in today's world, with some interesting things happening in terms of the global context with the Trump administration otherwise, and we'll get into some of that. But his focus really is to look at these international campuses. By the way, I'm John Douglas at the Center for Studies in Higher Ed. And so with that, Rahul, really pleased to have you. And why don't you start us off? I should say, format. Rahul will talk for a period, maybe 20 minutes or so, a bit more, up to him. And we will look for questions from the audience. So I'll be looking on the chat box, and then I have a series of questions to talk with him about both about what's happening in India, but also in the global market for international student mobility. So, Rahul, thank you.
Thank you so much, John. First of all, for that introduction and invitation to this webinar. Great to collaborate again. And thank you, Shanshan, for also putting this together. It's again a privilege to be a part of this conversation because CHE always does amazing events and really advances the discourse on higher education development. And the lens I was trying to bring here was as a scholar practitioner looking into some of the international campus development in India. And I do have a few slides, so maybe I'll just get started with this to facilitate our conversation. But for those who are able to join early 10 o'clock in Pacific and India time currently for me is 10:30 p.m. Uh, but we'll make it engaging and conversational. So feel free to drop in any questions. Uh, John, just wanted to confirm, can you see my slides okay?
Yeah. Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I will be talking about this image on the right-hand side as a metaphor for what I'll be concluding my presentation with. So drop in the bucket and the ripples. That's something to keep in mind as I walk through this topic of international campuses. Uh, What's the context? Very recently, as recent as in 2024, 25, the conversation around foreign universities coming to India uh, started happening. And this was a pretty uh, swift change in terms of the number of universities coming to India, but also the narrative in the Indian context in terms of the impact on private universities and mobility started picking up quite a lot of momentum. So my whole presentation is around this central question that how mobility of these campuses is going to shape the mobility of students. So as the barriers for some of the student mobility have been going up, as you will see in some of the subsequent slides, is the mobility of these international campuses coming to students instead of expecting students to come to them, are they a true replacement? and to what extent it is going to affect the mobility. So to look into this central question, I will be speaking in these four subsections. So I'll first of all walk you through in terms of the landscape of Indian higher education, the complexity, diversity, and the and the and the intricacies of the landscape of Indian higher education system. To situate that where does mobility of Indian students really sit in that context? And then come to the main question, which I'm trying to answer is, do international campuses affect the mobility? And then we'll talk about some of the conclusions and future research areas. So first of all, in terms of the landscape, we are talking about big numbers. Top line, this is the data from 2021, 22. We are talking about 43 million students enrolled in Indian higher education system. And that's clearly a large number. But when you put it in the context of the typology of institutions, it becomes complex. So there are, of course, 1,168 universities, but 45,000 plus colleges. Now, this is a very unique characteristic of Indian education system, which we will talk about affiliation of colleges with public universities. And then there are these 12,000 plus standalone institutions. So these are also autonomous institutions. They are running programs, but they will also be awarding credentials which will be affiliated with universities in some shape or form. But for the purpose of this discussion, I also want to start with the small numbers. So I shared about very big numbers, 43 million, but I want to contrast it with very small numbers. The small numbers coming from institutions many of you are familiar with, may have seen, heard, or interacted with alumni of these kind of institutions. IITs. So Indian Institute of Technologies, these are some of the highly selective institutes of engineering and technology. There are only 23 of them. And all over India, across India, there are only 1,700, 500 seats or new enrollment every year are eligible or available for these institutions. So these are highly selective. And they are not universities. These are institutes of national importance. They are classified as autonomous institutes, which have their own credentialing and degree awarding power, but they're not affiliated to a university. And the key thing here is to remember that they enroll very small slice of overall Indian student enrollment. And this characteristic is also on the management side. So there are IIMs, the Indian Institute of Managements. There are only 21 of them, enrolling 5,500 students every year. Highly selective again. So less than 1% of all the students who take the entrance exam for these institutions get to enroll into these institutions. Now, why I'm presenting this is something which I'll be talking later in the slides about the scale of international campuses. So these numbers are small, but they play a very important role in terms of aspirations of students. And the similar characteristics you will see in international campuses later in the slides. Now, this is, first of all, a very busy slide, a lot of text and numbers floating around. And let me just try to break it down for you that how it characterizes the public-private nature or classification of universities in India. So as I mentioned previously, there are 1,168 universities. I'm not talking at this point about colleges. So you will see that there are only 991, the total in terms of number of universities, because there are other types of universities also which I have not listed here. For example, open universities. So there are multiple types of universities. But broadly, this is a classification in terms of public and private to illustrate the point. So the top three are public institutions, central universities, which are funded by central resources, state public universities funded by provincial or state level resources. And then there are deemed universities. These are the governance and the approval of these universities is a little bit different from the other two. One of the key characteristics is that deemed public universities do not have affiliated colleges. So I'll talk about the colleges in the next slide. Then there are private universities. So deemed private university, and then there are state regulated private universities. Now, the other part of it is which university type enrolls how many students. So you would notice that almost 40% of the students are enrolled in state public universities, and another 40% are enrolled in state private universities. And they form pretty much the bulk of the enrollment at the university level. And this is to illustrate that there is a very high uh, proportion of students at the university level which are coming from private universities, which are very comparable to public universities. Now, affiliated colleges, and I promise you, we'll take a short break after I have given a lot of shared a lot of data at you for any questions. And John, feel free to um, let me know if there are any questions, and we can take a pause also. In terms of the colleges, as I was indicating, these are institutions which do not have degree awarding authority. So they are affiliated to a university, which has to be a public university. So it could be a state public university or a central public university, but the college itself could be public or private. Now, this is where the enrollment mix changes dramatically. In this case, of 30 million students total enrolled in colleges, public colleges enroll about 10 million, and private colleges enroll 20 million students approximately. And so to put these large numbers in perspective, all of you are higher education experts. You follow the sector very closely. So as you know, US enrollment in total is around 19.4 million students. And just private colleges who have no authority to award degrees are enrolling 20 million students. So it's a very skewed higher education system where private colleges play an outsized role in terms of absorbing the demand from students, and likewise public colleges. So overall, these 30 million students out of 43 million are just in colleges. To sum it up, the big takeaway here is that Indian higher education system is large, diversified, but having a very high component of private higher education in absorbing the demand, especially at the massification level, to really provide access to the masses. I'll pause here. John, if there is any question, I can take one here, but there was a lot of data.
Well, one thing, Rahul, is that there are 45 million students in the system total, according to your first slide. Yeah, you got 30 million are in private colleges. And then I saw the numbers are a little off, I think, right? Like, is there,
Right.
you got 28 million in, or 40, was it? Oh, well, sorry. The numbers, I was just wondering the difference when you add the colleges, but don't focus on that too much. Just
Yeah.
keep going.
Right. So I was giving an example that of the 43 million, I'm just taking a slice of about 36 million students, which are shown in these slides. There are some type
Oh,
of
thanks.
institutions like IITs, they have their numbers. Open universities, they have their own numbers. But if you just look at universities, there are 6 million, and these colleges have about 30 million. So
Oh,
36
sorry.
million out of
My
43
mistake.
are just in these
Right.
type of institutions.
Okay. Sorry. That was
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, that's where the complexity is of the different types of institutions. All right. So now we have talked about what are the different types of institutions, where the skew is in terms of public, private, university versus colleges. Now let's look at the mobility of Indian students as a second uh, key characteristic, that where the demand is coming from and where are they going. So in this one, I've looked up the Ministry of External Affairs India data, and this is summarizing the trend over the recent past from 2018 to 2024. It, of course, captures the pandemic impact also. But there are two, three key conclusions can be made. One is just in terms of the number of students. So nearly 759,000 students were enrolled overseas. Indian students were enrolled overseas in different destinations in 2024. Now, this number is lower than 892,000 students in 2023, which was all-time peak. Now, this peak was achieved after this pandemic pent-up demand was pretty much getting released. And so a lot of mobility during those years, and then it started subsiding in 2024. But there was, of course, a bigger impact of the changes in terms of immigration and policies, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Uh, but the other conclusion and the interpretation from this data is about where students are going. So if you see US in purple, second from the bottom, um, despite all its challenges over the years, from pandemic to uh, changes in the immigration policies, actually US still commands a pretty robust number of enrollment for Indian students. So the aspirations to study in the US are very strong. Now, converting that aspiration into reality, that remains a little bit of a gap. So even with this large number of students, um, there are many more who want to study and can't. And that's an untapped potential aspiration which has not been met. But there are a lot of students who still want to go to US. The next destinations are, of course, Canada, UK, and Australia. And one of the noteworthy one here is Canada. So if you will see the dramatic increase post-pandemic from that rust color, the brick color box from 2020, you see the dramatic increase up till 2023 and the decline after that. This is because of very, I would say, attractive post study work pathways, which were enabled by Canada. So it attracted a lot of students from India because it provided a very clear pathway for immigration and work. And that became so attractive that it almost became problematic. And Canada started turning the screws tight, and the numbers dropped dramatically from 23 to 24 and continue to drop actually now. So this is the first part of the picture to keep in mind, that despite all the challenges, US always had commanded in relation to other destinations very strong pull. Um, However, destinations like Canada, when they started changing the post-study work pathways, they attracted a lot of students. So if US continues to move towards a direction of tightening the visa and immigration pathways, that will definitely going to hurt the numbers for Indian students going to US, which I will show you in one more slide, data point. So I've talked about the destinations. On the right-hand side, I wanted to give you a sense of the level and the growth direction. So I've broken it down by bachelor's, doctorate, and master's. Actually, I could have done bachelor's, master's, and doctorate, but uh, the second column is showing the share of total enrollment as on April 2026 using DHS data. 80% of Indian students are enrolled in master's program. Again, connecting it to the Canada example, the post-study work pathways for master's students are very promising with OPT, which is optional practical training, especially for STEM graduates, which allows them to work for up to 3 years before looking for H-1B visa. So master's students provide a lot of value and ROI, if I may say, for Indian students who are very cost conscious. But look at the doctoral students, about 9%. This is enrollment, not new enrollment. There's total enrollment. And bachelor's, about 11. So doctorate and bachelor's are very small number, 20%, relative to master's. But look at on the right-hand side, that despite the contraction happening from 23 to 24 and 25 also, it is expected to be in the same direction. Actually, bachelor's and doctorate numbers have not changed negatively. They have grown, and in fact. So bachelor's enrollment has grown by 5%. It's a small increase, but it is positive. Doctoral level increased by 12%. Now, if you go to master's, that's where the contraction is happening because the OPT pathways and H-1B pathways and further tightening of visa, even issuance of F-1B visa have really affected the master's students more. Now, the next data point fills the important information piece here about the decline, how dramatic it is, how extreme it is, or expected to be for the fall 2025. So the numbers are still not out. They are available at some of the university level data, but aggregate at the national level, the data is, of course, not yet available for the new enrollment. There is data available for the total enrollment. But to understand that how the new enrollment may affect, I looked up the US Department of State's data of the visa issuance. And that indicates that for fall 2025, it is expected that around 58% decline in terms of new visa issuance. So that's the extent one can imagine, which is very, very sharp for new student enrollment. So the big takeaway from this section is from these slides are, while there is a huge growth, there is contraction happening, and that contraction is happening very steeply and seriously for the Indian students, especially at the master's level. But when you go to the bachelor's level, there is another very big challenge which is emerging. And that applies even actually for master's students, but bachelor students, it becomes even bigger. And that is about cost. Now, we have a lot of media coverage, a lot of conversations around the impact of immigration and visa policies on mobility of students. And that is true. It is negatively affecting it. But there is an under appreciated and undercovered aspect of it, and that is the affordability. So to put the numbers in perspective, we have to think about from the real out-of-pocket cost for Indian students to study overseas. Because of the depreciation of the currency, the real cost for Indian students is actually much higher than what may look like in US dollar terms. So I looked up the College Board data analyzed it for the 4 years between 2020 and 2024 fall data. Um, and what you would notice in the left-hand side in the box, it shows that the tuition and living expenses grew by 21%, about $8,000 annually. But on the right-hand side, what you will see is the real effect when you consider it in the Indian rupee terms because of the depreciation or devaluation of the currency. That increase in the cost is about 37%. So really twice as much as the US dollar increase. So Indian students are finding it a lot more difficult to afford studying in the US, especially when they have to pay for, let's say, undergraduate education, because now they have to pay for 4 years. Number two, uh, the the cost will continue to increase at the same level or even more, given the economic situation, geopolitical situation. And so the undergraduate pipeline is really losing the opportunity which US could have attracted at a much bigger number. But between the migration and the cost, that is one segment which is going to contract and lose some of the growth potential. Uh, but if this was not there. So we will see that how international campuses are potentially going to absorb some of the demand from this. This is the last slide on this section on student mobility. I wanted to now connect the first section, which I talked about the landscape of Indian higher education. I talked a little bit about the mobility of Indian students by level. Now, I've translated this into a simple framework. It's a conceptual framework, of course, so it just provides a way to think about uh, the different types of students enrolled in Indian higher education, and of course, putting mobility in that context. So right at the bottom, when I talked about public and private colleges, they absorb nearly 90% of all demand for post-secondary education. This can be classified as a type of students who are very cost conscious. And one of the biggest constraints for them is resources, financial resources to invest extensively for studying overseas. At the same time, they know that the feasibility to study overseas is not possible. So the aspirations are also contained in that way. So this 90% of the population, Indian students, is going into colleges, public or private. But the contrast to this segment is right at the top. Now, this is a segment which is about 1% of the students who aspire to go overseas and possess the resources to do so. Now, here, resources are not just financial. Of course, that's a very big component of it. But you can also talk about academic resources in terms of different kind of coaching, tutoring, out of classroom support, which really make them competitive to be admitted to some of the universities overseas. And then getting services for visa and immigration application and so on. So these are multiple resources which go along enabling that aspiration to become possible. It's a very small segment in the larger schema of enrollment. And I'm calling them global movers as compared to cost anchors who are really looking at the cost as a way to keep them anchored into India versus global movers who are able to really be mobile and go overseas. Now, between these two extremes is the middle segment, which has very limited options. And this is a segment which has the resources. So let me rephrase. So this is a segment which either lacks the aspiration, so they may have all the resources but don't want to go overseas. They want to stay in India for a variety of reasons, right? It could be family business, it could be they don't want to just go overseas and find getting private education here in India. So they may lack the aspiration to study overseas, or they may uh, not have the resources to study overseas. So in that case, they have the aspiration, but not the resources to go overseas. So one of the two things is missing. Now, this is a big segment which is looking for value. Um, and often that value is provided currently by private universities. So you remember in that first slide, when I was talking about different types of universities, there are 5 types of universities I talked about. And I talked that private universities enroll about 3 million students. Almost 40% of 3 million, almost 1.4, 1.5 million students. That's the segment which has a lot of aspirations or the resources, but not enough options to study in India. So this brings up to the conclusion that despite a very large diversified system, India still has limited options of quality private higher education, especially for that middle segment, which is seeking quality, but at the affordable prices or investment. I'll just take a pause here. John, if there is any question from attendees or from you.
Well, only on the one question which we chatted before about is that on the U.S. market side, I looked at UC and its enrollment of Indian students, international Indian students, and what little I could get was in the fall. It was about a 25% decline in graduate education, students going to graduate school in the UC system. And at least I've had some discussions that there is there are it's differences across the different institutional types in the U.S. as to where the decline. You're saying 58%. We're seeing something like that within the whole U.S. But there still tends to be, even though there are declines, of some strength in the brand name institutions. It's when you go down the food chain, shall we say, of different institutional types, are having some real changes in the market. That's just a note about the UC system. But I think you should keep going, looking at the time so we can get more questions in at the end.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. And that the differences are not only in terms of institutional types, but also state. So there is a very interesting pattern which is emerging that some of the states are seeing more decline than the others. And there is a relationship potentially in terms of the
Would
political
that be
environment.
red states by any chance, or is it more like urban versus rural kind of differences?
Yeah, so both are emerging. Both things are emerging. So overall, Indian students actually enroll quite a lot in Texas and Florida
Mm.
for a couple of reasons, from weather to cost and large public university systems to uh, yeah. So there were some reasons, and that numbers have started contracting very quickly. So there are trends emerging that numbers are losing in those states. All right. Now, coming to this section on international campuses in India, first of all, I wanted to set the context in terms of that this conversation is very old, 2 decades old. And as John was introducing earlier, I've been following this as a scholar practitioner for nearly 2 decades now. And this was one of the areas which I was writing about even at that point when the first time the bill was announced. Uh, and I was at WES during those days. But it never moved past discussions and a proposal of the bill. Over next almost 16, 17 years, pretty much nothing happened. Every time the bills was presented, nothing moves forward. More has happened in the last 3 years than the previous 17 years. And in terms of bringing foreign universities to India. So what changed? There are two big changes which happened. First is this national education policy announced in 2020. right in the middle of the pandemic. It was a pretty broad document. It's a directional vision setting document rather than operationally detailed document. So one of the things which it mentioned was NEP will allow for selected universities among the top 100 universities in the world to operate in India. Now, it didn't mention which rankings, what is the feasibility of it, but it set that vision that, okay, bring universities to India. Couple of years later, a regulation called GIFT City Regulation. GIFT is a special economic zone in Gujarat state, close to Ahmedabad city. And This is where the first regulation came up. Because it's a special economic zone, it was allowing for universities to come there and allow them to operate in US dollars. They don't have to, they will be a little bit free from Indian regulatory environment. And that became the first regulation. And in that one, very clearly it specified instead of top 100, it became top 500 globally ranked universities. So there was a feasibility reality check started happening. The top 100 would not be interested to come to India, nor it is feasible for them to come to India to maintain the reputation, research excellence in the Indian environment as a first step. So they came in, but it only allowed for STEM and finance focused degrees, very specifically focused on high tech, job oriented research, but on the technical side. A year later came the UGC regulation, which is the central government regulatory body. It oversees all the universities in India. And there, the key thing it mentioned, it had the same regulation of top 500 universities. But one thing which also became very clear and it was spelled out there that the degree should be same as the foreign university which is coming to India, which means if a university of X is coming to India, it has to exactly be the same university as awarded in their home campus. And that became pretty unique offering. Now, to put the number in perspective, that how many universities started coming to India just between the regulatory change in 2023 to today, 19. Now, in the larger scheme of the number of universities we talked about, 19 is a very small number. But look at the context of rankings, despite all its limitations. I know we are fully cognizant of some of the ranking limitations. But look at the Times Higher Ed ranking. There are only 4 Indian universities which are listed among the top 500. In the QS rankings, only 9 universities are listed. Combined, even if I'm not considering any of the overlaps between the two rankings, only 13 universities would be among the top 500. International campuses, which are coming in, 19 of them, they're all among the top 500. They should be among one of the two rankings. And there is Shanghai ranking also. There are 3, 4 rankings they have listed there. But that opens up a completely new set of universities of high quality to come to India and expand their choices for the middle segment, if you remember. Now, the numbers are again very small, like we have talked about IITs. There are only some 23 IITs and 21 IIMs. So 19 international campuses are very comparable in just a matter of a couple of years. Now, where are they going and where are they coming from? This is also a very interesting pattern which has emerged, where you can see the entrepreneurial nature of Australian and British universities moving very quickly. There are 8 Australian universities coming, 10 British universities coming in, and only 1 US university coming in. And where are they going? They are getting pretty much concentrated in terms of 5 of them in that gift city, which I mentioned about the special economic zone, 5 in Mumbai, and 5 in Bangalore. So just between 3 cities, 15 universities out of 19 are getting concentrated. and 18 out of 19 are coming from UK and Australia. So now you can see the source and destination part of it is getting really concentrated, which also means there are a lot of untapped opportunities in terms of other destinations, one, but other countries also moving in over time. I'm just being mindful of the time. So coming to another question which is worthwhile to answer, that we have looked at 19 campuses, where they come from, where are they going, but how many students are they going to enroll? Are they going to be in thousands? Are they going to be in hundreds? What is the scale we are talking about? So this is the Reuters report in 2026 February, based on one of the first campuses which started in India from the University of Southampton in UK. It's among the from the, of course, Russell Group top 100 university. It opened its campus in August in Delhi area, more specifically Gurgaon, um, and it only started with 120 students. And even over the next decade, it plans to be enrolling 5,500 students, um, which is a very modest number if you think about it. Just to give you the perspective, NYU, which enrolls the largest number of international students in the US, alone enrolls more than 25,000 international students. And number of Chinese students, of course, would be comparable to this number of 5,500. So again, the key point which I wanted to make here is that while the numbers can be modest for international campuses, uh, they may play a very outsized role in terms of what will happen in the Indian higher education in the next 5-10 years, especially its impact on private higher education, number one, number two, student mobility, and number three, academic and professional talent. So I'll talk about it in the next slide. But the key thing I wanted to contrast and compare here is, while the scale may not be there, the impact could be pretty big, like IITs, which enroll only 17,500 students per year, but they have a very high aspiration level. As I mentioned, only 1% of the students get selected, but 99% who aspire to go to IITs, but they have to settle with the next best. So likewise, international campuses are going to have a big impact over time, even though the numbers are going to be very modest. And they're going to expand the quality private higher education, especially to that middle segment, the value maximizers. So I think I'm coming to my last slide here. So open to any questions after that. The key takeaways, the first one, the arrival of international campuses has one of the most opportune timing. I talked about the study abroad headwinds in terms of immigration pathways, visa pathways becoming stricter and narrower, and the cost is also going up. In this time, the policy framework which came up in India to allow international campuses just had the right timing to really absorb a small subset of mobile students to find this alternative to be valuable. But this is not going to replace or replicate traditional student mobility, because still underlying the international mobility, there is a huge drive and appetite of gaining international experience, finding pathways for immigration, and that cannot be replaced by these campuses. So they are going to widen the choice to the segment of students who want to earn global degree at home, and it is going to strengthen the internationalization at home. But there is no way it is going to replace, or even it is feasible to replicate, the traditional campus experience, lived experience overseas um, through these campuses. And the third point I wanted to make is that the scale, when put in perspective of the real scale of Indian higher education system and its diverse, complex nature, the number of students enrolled in international campuses are likely to be modest in the immediate short term. But over the medium term, they will really have the ripple effect on private universities. And this is something which has a lot of potential for future research and uh, also the opportunity to engage. So as I mentioned, the first slide, which I mentioned about the drop in the bucket, that's what they are at this point of time. Uh, so the introduction and evolution of international campus is literally the drop in the bucket at this point. But the impact on student choices and experience is going to be the next order effect, the ripple effect. And the third order effect is going to be the demand and supply of academic talent and the professional services talent, including the mobility back of some of the academic talent who may potentially come back to India because these private universities, international branch campuses, can offer them a great experience to be in India while leveraging their international education pathways, international education, when the pathways for finding employment in other places is really becoming tighter. There is a whole slide on future research questions, but I'll just park it for next time. Um, but I'll stop sharing and over to over to you, John.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rahul. If you have a question, you can throw it into the chat box and we can see how we can integrate it. So I have a number of questions. One is, are we going to see a lot more of these international campuses? Is there any projection of their growth uh, in perhaps other parts of India, but also just generally, they're going to be more than that have started already?
Yeah, based on some of the conversations and not just with the universities themselves, but also with the informally with other regulators and other sources, uh, almost double the number expected next year. So at least 15 universities are in different stages of conversations, exploration, um, moving from wait and watch to action. So they're giving this another year to see how these campuses may pan out. But next year, expected to be around 15 plus universities to
And
be
will it be the
active.
same pattern? Australia, UK. I mean, you had one US. Like it's not that Michigan State. They left, right? So which one? What's the US one? Uh,
Yeah, so the one currently which is going to start its campus in August, September, it's Illinois Tech.
oh yes, right. Illinois Tech. Okay. So, but similar pattern. We'll see these kind of Anglophile countries coming in. I know when we chatted too, noting that the limitations on international students is not just in the US and the kind of restraints we're having with the price and all that, but in the UK as well. And these UK institutions at least are seeking other ways to bring in international students. And if that means starting a campus in India, I guess that's one of the patterns. But is it going to be a similar kind of Anglophile grouping of institutions interested in doing this?
Yes. So there is a large interest from Australian and British universities still. And this is no surprise that at least um, when the mobility of students is getting um choked, universities are also getting hurt. And so there is um, this openness for universities to come to students. And most of them are likely to be coming from Australia and UK, but also in continental Europe. There are some conversations happening. But what is happening also is one of the ripple effect, which I didn't mention, but there is whole new circuit and set of conversations which have started about activating these research partnerships and 2+2 and transnational education partnerships, which are not campus based necessarily. But
Mhm.
universities have realized if I don't and I can't go the campus route, I need to do something more to substitute for that. So this whole conversations about research collaborations and academic collaborations have really picked up pace in the last 2 years.
Yeah, at least some of those research collaborations are also looking right at kind of global South um, partnerships like Brazil or other places. So there, at least that was my impression that we're seeing some shifting in terms of wanting to expand those kind of relationships, but not necessarily with the U.S. I mean, of course, they always would like to, but there are a lot of barriers now coming up with the UK. But a lot of that is coming through the global South. But you're not sending that many students from India to the global south, maybe parts of Asia, or where are they going?
Yeah, that's a small number. Like in that initial chart which I had, about 15% of the students are rest of the world outside the big four. So the outside Australia, UK, Canada, and US, only about 15% of the students are going in other destinations. So English speaking world is still the big pull because it provides them the really leveraging the English language advantage, providing them those pathways for recovering the cost of education. But the other 15%, which I was mentioning, yes, they are attracting students to some extent. They are absorbing some of the demand, but they are also very keen on building these kind of research partnerships and the academic collaborations also. So even with Japan and Korea, for example, there is a lot more happening now
Hmm.
because of these kind of economic activity also, which is kind of enabling it in India.
So one question we have from Mauricio Narad, who's a longtime associate with the center, is what about the labor market side of this? Uh, there's lots of jobs for those coming out. I take it still that there's a focus on STEM in the international campuses, but I don't know, like Aberdeen, whether you have a broader range of potential degrees. I know you're just beginning, but what about the labor market side of this? Is if you go to an international branch campus, does it guarantee you, or is there a sense that it guarantees you a job in the labor market?
Yeah. Very, very good question because this is something which comes up very often from parents and students. It's a highly outcomes driven landscape. So this is another characteristic of Indian higher education, which many people may not be aware, is there is something called placement system, right? Like these are basically career support services, but they're not advisory. They are literally getting the job for the student. Why and how? Because they bring the employers to the campus. They do the interviews over weekends and whole week placement weeks, and they give the job offers at the end of it. So that is an expectation set up even for international campuses that they should be providing very high labor outcomes, and to some extent, some of the outcomes better than what is available in other private universities. That is an expectation, but over time, that is yet to be seen because only one campus has graduated students yet. That is Deakin University from Australia and from GIFT in the Ahmedabad campus. They offered 1 year master's program, so their students have graduated. They found better jobs, but yeah, more details yet to be seen.
Well, a related question by Maurici and then Igor Chirikov as
Yeah.
well is
Yes.
what about
Uh,
what I think, let me keep going, Maurici, is that what about the prestige of these campuses, these international branch campuses? I mean, again, it's early going, but would a segment of those students who are thinking about going abroad and have the money and capacity, part of that first group you noted, are they part of that market for these international campuses? I mean, the way you described it was more that they're not, but they're going to go abroad if they have the family. But is there a sense of prestige that's close to equivalent, or is that, again, it's early. Maybe you're hoping to get that prestige, but is that those students, are they thinking of either or is it a price factor?
yeah. Very much. And that's why I wanted to discuss it from that mobility perspective, that who is going where by the level of education. So there will be some trading down, if I may use that phrasing, trading down from those who want to go overseas at the undergraduate level. They may trade down to these campuses if in that way because they are getting a lot more value in terms of investment, in terms of feasibility to earn a global credential. They can still go as an exchange student for 1 semester, 1 year, or transfer after 2 years spending in India, and they can still get a foreign credential with the same university, right? So they may consider to stay back, get at the undergraduate level couple of years or a full degree in India, and then go for masters later on. But for the master students, the biggest opportunity is trading up. So those in the bottom 90%, which I was mentioning, who had limited opportunities, uh, they may trade up and say, oh, I can get a global degree in India, master's degree, 1 year, if I put in a little bit more money. And that's where the little bit of a difference would be by undergraduate versus master's.
What about the financing? We talked about this before as well, but in other words, there isn't public money being put into these. Like I don't know, there's land or capital or something, but these are partnerships between, like in the University of Aberdeen, with private investors in some form, which we see all over the world and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of joint. It's a joint. There isn't any direct public cost, if I remember correctly. So but it makes it financially viable for Aberdeen, right? That they could make a profit or whatever. Just describe a little bit about the financial structure of these campuses.
Yeah. So that's a very good question because uh, these international campuses exist around the world, from China to Dubai to Malaysia. They all have hosted international campuses over the years. Uh, One of the characteristic which is very unique here, they all have to come as joint venture between a private player and a university. So they are self-funded, self-sustained campuses, no public money involved whatsoever. So they have to be appropriately priced in terms of the tuition offering, but also need to be scalable over time. The financing will not involve public funding. I mean, even from their home campus, they may not be available as much. It's a private player who will be putting it together, and then there will be a sharing of the resources.
So Aberdeen will make money off this deal.
I mean, though any university who will be coming to the partnerships here has to have, first of all, a very clear case and interest to build something of quality here. Because any university, top 500, top 1,000, any university comes to any market, any country, need to make sure they preserve reputation and also, right? I was giving one example, like for MSU in Dubai, right? It went 25 years ago to MSU, failed miserably. It has to go back. There are other campuses in Singapore. They also had to go back. But there are success stories also on the other side, like I was mentioning about Middlesex in Dubai, which started at the same time as MSU. But that has been one of the success stories. So there are many other factors which go into the success of and DNA of a campus. But the key thing which is going on for international campuses in India is that the timing, scale, regulatory environment, untapped appetite, just huge number of students who are looking for quality education, all those things for now seems to be promising for these campuses.
The scale is just astounding. It's hard to fathom from our viewpoint. Just a couple more questions, and we need to conclude. But this relates. Maurice's asking another question that relates a
Yes.
little bit to what I was going to ask, and that is the labor market for those students going abroad. In other words, the labor market either where they are going, like in the US, where you could potentially, in the old days, you could stay on and start a business and become part of the Silicon Valley elite, which will still happen, but there are barriers to that. But I was more or less related to that, but is these shifts in the global market for international talent, and India as being such an important and large source, including China as the big player. What kind of shifts do you see coming on? Are we going to see this continuing decline in interest by Indian students or ability to go to the U.S.? Perhaps they're going to be more able to go to Europe or parts of Europe in which also costs are lower generally for international students. But what kind of major shifts do we see? And getting back to Maurice's question, does it relate to some degree on, how easy is it for a student to go on into the labor market, or those, in the traditional way, the brain drain was that they would stay in the UK or stay in the US, and some would come back to India, and maybe that pattern will change. So I'm sorry, back to this bigger question, some observations about what's happening in the global market for international students.
Yeah, so big picture, I mean, the international student mobility has a lot of underlying factors, and it's a complex decision making for students also. But the underlying drivers are that okay, they are looking for success and betterment, right? Educationally, socially, financially, culturally, whichever shape and form we can look at. And I know like I remember Maresi's research from some of the work I've seen when on the doctoral education from the CGS side, which has been done. So I mean, everybody's looking for international student mobility from betterment, from where they are to what they will end up with. So that will remain intact unless things start changing geopolitically to make them more attractive to come. In the short term, it doesn't look like this is going to become easier. If anything, it is going to become tougher. So, I mean, at least for next 3 years, we can be very safe to say things are going to be on the contraction. The number of students going to continue to shrink, who will find an opportunity, even though they have aspiration, but those aspirations will be very difficult to fulfill.
Yeah, I don't know. See how you can, what kind of recovery pattern you can have when you have a 58% in the getting back to the American market, a 58% decline in new students. No, that's total, right? No, that's new
No,
students.
new.
Yeah, new students. So there's a pattern. And then I don't know, we haven't seen numbers about the persistence of others, but I suppose you could figure that out from the data. But yeah, I mean, just seems like that's a really big indicator. And, again, getting back to all the other questions that have been asked as well as the job market, a lot of students went abroad, yes, to get an education, but also to be able to participate in America's capitalist system of some sort. And that just is all kind of shrinking away. I don't really understand how quickly it could recover, even if you get a new president or something in the U.S. That's 3 years. Well, we'll see. Away, 3.5, 2.5, I guess. Or no, no, a little more, no, a little more, 3. So yeah, how that can shift. So my final question, then, any observations? Is, when the U.S. becomes, getting back to the U.S. side of the story, is when you become, known as being anti-immigrant, potentially a dangerous place to go, politically not a great environment for an Indian student. Um, is that a permanent kind of observation? Like it starts to come baked in and they find other pathways like to Europe or to China, but also perhaps other parts of Asia, which is growing. We have these increasing quality of international higher education in various parts of the world. It's not just the Anglo world kind of structure that we've had dominant for some period of time. But is there a kind of a permanent aspect to that? No, new pathways will be found, and then that really changes. This is that long-term kind of approach. What's your final observations on that?
Mhm. Yeah. So the it's like that balloons analogy, right? Like, so demand is maybe getting shifted from US to other destinations, but it is not getting dissipated. Like in Canada, you saw that huge jump because US was still trying to contract a lot of pathways for visa and immigration even then. So the demand got shifted to where the policies were more welcoming. This happened even in UK and Australia also previously, and they all have started again tightening the screw. So it goes through its waves of loosening and tightening, but the demand still is very strong for mobility. The aspirations are still very strong. They will just get redirected to new destinations, which may offer more value in terms of lower cost, because it's a very value conscious student segment, right? Like they are looking for affordability is a challenge. So they are looking for where they can invest less, even if that is not uh, the best destination they in their minds. Still, US holds despite all its constraints. If you today
Mhm.
ask anyone if there was no constraint, where would you like to go? US still comes number one,
Mhm.
undisputed. Everything else is a compromise, and those compromises could be in terms of cost, immigration, access, admissions, visa, add anything.
That
So it will get
1%.
redirected for now. Yeah,
That 1%, which
at
is huge,
1%.
which is still really large. It's an amazing thing. Well, Rahul, thank you so much. I look forward to hopefully we're going to do some collaborations on student mobility issues, and really appreciate your expertise. And this will is being videotaped, so we'll post it, and I hope we'll distribute it widely so that more people can listen to you and learn more about India. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to those who joined us as well. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for hosting and for those who are able to join. Really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch. Bye.